Hello everyone, it's Theme Park Avenue, I'm Eric. Not long ago I did a top 10 overrated roller coasters list. Let's turn that around and talk about my top 10 most underrated roller coasters I've ridden. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel so you know when new theme park content comes out. I do more than just these kinds of rankings, I do reviews, and tons of content both serious and funny. Now keep in mind, this is based on personal experience. You may find them overrated, may find them perfectly rated, but I find these 10 rides underrated. And there will be a few rides grouped together here, but let's begin. Number 10 is Daredevil Dive at Six Flags Over Georgia. This is the best Gerstlauer I've been on. And I've been on Hang Time at Knott's Berry Farm. This one just has such an intensity to it. From the first drop to the inversions to the turns, the only flaw with the intensity and pacing is the second half being a bit slower due to the fact that there is a brake run. But it's not too harsh, and I think the first half really carries well enough that I don't mind. The minor theming elements add a tiny bit, and I thoroughly enjoy a ride on this one, and its pacing is simply relentless, and it's good enough that I consider it a truly great ride, while many think it's just kind of okay. So I definitely think underrated. Number 9 is Kingda Ka at Six Flags Great Adventure. I think people are coming around and saying this one is world class, so it's not going to be any higher than 9. However, I hear so many say it's not great. I think for a while it was pretty popular to just not talk about this ride and say how El Toro and Nitro are best in the park. But nah, Kingda Ka is the best in the park for me. I like El Toro quite a bit, but Kingda Ka slays. This one is incredibly intense. The launch builds up significantly more speed than Dragster, it feels like. And yes, Dragster's gone now, but for comparison, it felt like you were getting pushed back way more. It feels taller, faster, longer, and riding it in the front row in the cold is quite an adrenaline rush. I think it is a pretty hard experience to beat. The launch is good enough that this is a wonderful ride without any other elements basically. The airtime hill is nice, the restraints don't bother me, the ride is glass smooth, I like the setting of the ride, the parking lot thing doesn't bother me much, and I like the whole forest idea, and in general, this is a top tier roller coaster. Number 8 is the Superman Ultimate Flight flying roller coasters. There's one at Kingda Ka's Park, also at Six Flags Great America and Six Flags Over Georgia. These people have not come around to as much, and in general they seem to get a bit of hate. Some people really don't like flying coasters, but I think they are among the best models out there, period. They are so much fun. The position is not uncomfortable, and it really does feel like you're flying. I love the idea of it, and it works well on every B&M flying coaster. I'll say these are pretty much the weakest of the model from what I've seen, but I love all three of them. Over Georgia's is the best for its great setting and terrain usage, but the others are still fun. The pretzel loop is an insane inversion, and the twist near the end of it is also good. I will say, one more inversion and one less turn could probably do good for the ride as a whole, but it is underrated, and for each park it's at, I would say it is the third best roller coaster at Six Flags Over Georgia, probably the 5th best at Six Flags Great America, and the 6th best at Six Flags Great Adventure. So being very high up in all three of those parks, and much higher than most would put it, means it is definitely, for me, underrated. Number 7 is Runaway Mine Train at Six Flags Over Texas. This Aero Mine Train is insane. The final drop out of the little saloon scene is one of the scariest drops ever. And I'm not kidding. You get thrown over the side. And the other parts are smooth. I think some consider it a rough mine train, but I do not. Everything about it, I enjoy. I like the way it weaves around the forest and setting. The speed keeps up really well for an Aero Mine Train. Unlike Thunderation, it does not hurt. And it's basically the perfect Aero Mine Train. It also has some historic value, which is nice, but honestly, while most would say it's just another average family coaster at Over Texas and probably number 10 or so in the park, I'd say it has to be number 7 in the park. It is a great ride. And I think more people will come around to that in the future when they realize just how good that final drop is. And the rest of it is great too. Number 6 is Millennium Force at Cedar Point. This had to be on the list. Similar to Kingda Ka, it gets flack. There are still plenty of people out there who think Millennium Force is Millennium Forceless. I don't get it. I have been on this well over a dozen times now. It's among my most ridden coasters probably, honestly. And I think I have gotten forceful rides every single time. And not just forceful rides, some of the most powerful and intense rides of any roller coaster I've experienced. The overbank and turn into the first tunnel is the closest I've ever come to graying out. And I have been on some pretty intense rides before. The first drop is the single best of any roller coaster. I've talked about this one so much before, I still love it, and I think in the future, similar to King Ka, more and more people will start to say, okay, this one's not just stats, it does have a great experience to back up the fact that it was called one of the best roller coasters by the general public for a very long time. Number 5 is New Texas Giant at Six Flags Over Texas. Seeing a pattern here, Over Texas has a few underrated ones, and this is one of the best RMC hybrids. Okay, not really. It's right around the middle. But honestly, I think it gets too much hate. I consider it better than quite a few, including Goliath at Great America, Outlaw Run, and Wicked Cyclone. I do like those a lot, and it's very close. And while New Texas Giant does have a flaw, that being the second half kind of losing pace a little bit, I think it's such a fun ride. It doesn't have inversions, but inversions are rarely the best part of an RMC, so I don't miss them. All of the airtime is great. The way it goes through some pretty massive elements, it reminds me of Millennium Force a lot. It's like hybrid Millennium Force. I love the experience, and even though it's not technically the best of RMCs by any means, I have more fun with it than most. And while something is just kind of a good ride, but bad by RMC standards and they clearly improved every time since, I disagree. And I think they made few things quite as good as it, honestly, in quite a few ways. Not to mention it has the best restraints by far of any RMC. Number 4 is the Joker at Six Flags Discovery Kingdom. This is even better than New Texas Giants, and better than every other RMC I named. As a matter of fact, I only prefer Iron Gwazi, Steel Vengeance, Twisted Colossus, and Iron Rattler. Some think this is the worst RMC, but I don't really get that. I will admit the first drop is among the weakest of the main RMC hybrids. However, every other element and aspect of the ride is near flawless. The inversions are the best of any RMC, with the exception of Iron Gwazi, which is carried by one. The airtime is right there with all the others. The pacing is better, it feels longer than most all of them, and it has nothing I can possibly dislike. There's not a whole lot else to say about this one. I understand in a way that means it's kind of blending together with other ones, and I guess it doesn't have the same standout elements that others do, but maybe it's better to have a ton of fantastic elements that blend together even if there isn't one truly unbelievable one, than having some unbelievable ones and the rest of the experience be more forgotten. It's a real jack-of-all-trades situation, and I would say Joker, in a certain way, is a jack-of-all-trades. Number 3 is both Batwing and Nighthawk. The current Vekoma Flying Dutchman models, I've heard awful stuff about both. I've heard good stuff too, but some, I'll cite Coaster Studios as a main example, have said they hate these rides. And while sure, Firehawk was probably better, these are still amazing. I love both of them. Nighthawk I used to hate, so I understand. But now it's super good. There is no headbanging, and while it's not as intense as Batwing, the setting is great, and that Vekoma loop is still pretty nuts. Batwing is a bit of a step up, with even more intensity, and the Helix being kinda terrifying. I love the Vekoma Flying Dutchman coasters. So far, they are probably my favorite Vekoma coasters I've ridden. And overall, they are the definition of underrated because some people hate them, don't just think they're good, some hate them, and I love them. Number 2, another tie, Gatekeeper and X-Flight. The two B&M wing coasters I've ridden, I think wing coasters are a very underrated model. Gatekeeper and X-Flight are very different. Let's start with Gatekeeper. This is a perfectly smooth ride. Every inversion is awesome. I love the airtime hill. The keyhole is so fun. It is one of the most beautiful roller coasters in the world. It is a fun experience. And in general, the wing coaster model is just enjoyable. I feel like this ride is way more forceful than given credit for, where I really get thrown in the airtime hill, and the first inversion is actually one that really pushes me against my seat. I have so much fun with this one, and there's really nothing more a ride needs to be. X-Flight is more intense. This one has some crazy inversions to it that I think outshine Gatekeeper in quite a few ways. It does have a bumpy finale that's not as fun as most things about Gatekeeper, but the near-miss elements are even better. I love the ride, and in both parks, these wing coasters are top 5. X-Flight being top 3 for me at Great America. They are underrated, some don't love them, but I think they are an absolute blast. I enjoy them in the same way I like New Texas Giant, and what more could I possibly ask for? Well, there is one thing, and that's number 1. Runaway Mountain at Six Flags Over Texas. This would not have made the list before my most recent visit to the park, but wow. A re-ride, and this is one of the most unbelievably good roller coasters out there. You would not expect it to be. Stats are unimpressive, it seems like another Skull Mountain. It's just kind of another family indoor coaster, right? Short lines, small height requirements. Everyone thinks it's number 8 or 9 in the park, but no. This is my number 5 in the park. And I know that seems like maybe I don't love it as much as it would imply, and it may not be the most underrated of all roller coasters you'd think, but based on my experience, it is. There's this one twisted drop in the dark that is, unironically, the best drop at Six Flags Over Texas. The darkness adds quite a bit, the ride feels long, every element is intense but also smooth, and I dare say this is one of the better Premier Rides coasters out there. So while most people think it's just a fine roller coaster, and I imagine this is the roller coaster on the list where the fewest amount of people agree with me, I think that's what makes it all the more underrated, and I honestly think if you go to Six Flags Over Texas, this should be a top priority. I think some people might come around to this one. I'm more skeptical than most of the others, but I am hopeful that someday Runaway Mountain will be recognized as one of the best and most underrated roller coasters out there by even more people. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed this video. Comment down below what roller coasters you think are underrated and how crazy some of my picks are. Subscribe for more content, I'll see you next time.